Imagine that you have been living in the zero gravity of space for the past 6 months, about 250 miles above the Earth on the International Space Station. You have seen the world from a perspective that very few people ever get to see. You have experienced weightlessness, and as an astronaut, you have also conducted many groundbreaking experiments. And now it's time for you to return home. How will you come back to Earth, leaving behind that extraordinary place floating in the dangerous space? Returning to Earth from space is the most complex and dangerous part of any space mission. It's not as easy as the spacecraft gently landing on Earth, as is often shown in movies. There are no shortcuts in this, no room for mistakes, only precise planning, physics, and a lot of courage are needed. Life on the International Space Station. Why return home? There are no shortcuts in this, no room for mistakes. You need physics and a lot of courage because your muscles and bones become weak. There are no shortcuts in this, no room for mistakes. You need physics and a lot of courage. We can't stay in isolation away from our loved ones for too long. This isn't good for the astronauts' mental health either. There are no shortcuts in this, and there's no room for mistakes. You need physics and a lot of courage. There are no shortcuts in this, and there are no shortcuts for mistakes. You need physics and a lot of courage. There are no shortcuts for mistakes in this. You need physics and a lot of courage. There are no shortcuts in this. There are no shortcuts. You need physics and a lot of courage. There are no shortcuts in this. Mistakes. There are no shortcuts. You need physics and a lot of courage. Undocking is a slow, controlled process in which the spacecraft uses springs and thrusters to separate. There are no shortcuts in this. There are no shortcuts for mistakes. You need physics and a lot of courage. But once the spacecraft safely moves away from the space station, then comes the biggest step. There are no shortcuts in deorbit burn. There are no shortcuts for mistakes. You need physics and a lot of courage. It will remain stuck in Earth's orbit until its speed is reduced, and that's where the deorbit burn is used. There are no shortcuts in this. You need physics and a lot of courage. There are no shortcuts in this. Physics, a lot of courage is needed. There are no shortcuts. You need physics and a lot of courage. During the deorbit burn, they realize that gravity has returned, but during re-entry, they are in free fall. While coming through Earth's atmosphere, they are enduring a lot of heat and pressure. Re-entry is often described as the most dangerous part of this entire process. To achieve this precisely, a perfect balance of physics, engineering, and human courage is required. Once the spacecraft starts descending, both the capsule and the crew face the forces of the atmosphere. At this point, the spacecraft is moving at 17,500 miles per hour, and it dives into the thick layers of Earth's atmosphere to descend. Friction between the spacecraft and air molecules generates enormous heat, almost up to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This heat is so intense that if the spacecraft doesn't have a heat shield, it would melt like a candle. And sometimes this can be up to 5 times greater than our normal force of gravity. Just imagine if suddenly your body became 5 times heavier and you're falling through the atmosphere surrounded by flames. Because of the friction between the spacecraft and the atmosphere, there's another major problem, and that's plasma blackout. When the spacecraft tears through the atmosphere towards Earth, during that time both sides have to rely on the spacecraft's onboard systems. That's why, before re-entry, very careful planning is done. During re-entry, there's one more extremely critical thing. If the angle is off, it will bounce back into space again. Like tossing a stone into water, it often skips. That's why, during this time, the entire spacecraft has to be navigated on autopilot so that the correct angle of re-entry can be achieved. But that speed is still not low enough to let the capsule hit the ground directly, and that's where parachutes come in handy. After surviving the intense heat and G-forces of re-entry and the deployment of parachutes, the spacecraft enters a critical phase. Parachute deployment happens at about 1,800 feet above the ground, and the deployment of parachutes is a crucial step. The main parachute slows down the descent, and the deployment sequence of the parachutes is very important for the safety of the spacecraft. Viregneshak and Vedantav have contributed significantly. Because the emotional tone is felt from the parachutes and the slow descent of the space capsule. Although the descent is not over yet, even though the journey of every space capsule is almost the same, after this, the paths change. For example, if you are in a Soyuz capsule, retro rockets are fired just before touchdown, so that the impact speed of the space capsule can be reduced even further, just before the spacecraft hits the ground. These small rockets slow down the rocket with one final thrust so that the space capsule can land safely. If these thrusters weren't there, the touchdown would be much more severe. The speed of the capsule decreases significantly before touchdown. That's why astronauts don't get many injuries and are sent for further processing. Finally, when the spacecraft has landed either on solid ground or in the ocean water, that's why astronauts don't get many injuries. The recovery teams don't waste any time opening the hatch and getting the astronauts out of the capsule. That's why astronauts don't get many injuries. That's why the recovery teams help them walk and move around. In the case of SPACEX's Crew Dragon, the capsule lands in the ocean. That's why astronauts don't get many injuries, and several procedures are done to help them adapt to Earth's environment. In both cases, astronauts have to go through several medical evaluations to ensure that their health is okay or not. Due to the changes that happen in their bodies from living in space, it can take them weeks or even months to recover. Their muscles and bones start getting strong again. They often have trouble walking, but with time, everything starts to become normal. For astronauts, coming back to Earth is a bittersweet experience. They have completed a successful mission, they have returned home to their families, but somewhere they have left behind that extraordinary experience they had while living in space. Space is full of mysteries. At every step, new mysteries and surprises are waiting for us here. As much fascination and attraction as we have for space, there are even more fears associated with it. Whether it's a rocket bursting into flames during launch, exploding in the air while heading to space, or burning up in the atmosphere while returning to Earth. In every situation, there is always a real risk of the astronaut on board losing their life. The fear that everything could collapse and be destroyed in a moment always haunts them. But nowadays, the incidents we've seen happen in the past either occurred while going from Earth to space, or how long they survived. We'll be able to find out. How will this entire journey come to a tragic end? Well, to find out, stay tuned for the full story in today's special documentary. April 12, 1961, the date when, for the first time, a human broke through Earth's atmosphere and accomplished this feat. It's been 61 years since the first human spaceflight, and in those 61 years, a total of 574 people have traveled to space. In this sequence, 18 people have lost their lives in 4 different accidents. All three were Soviet cosmonauts. This incident occurred nearly 50 years ago. On June 30, 1971, a Soviet crew of 3 members was returning to Earth after completing their 3-week-long mission. This was the historic Soyuz 11 mission, which gave birth to the world's first space station, Salyut 1. These cosmonauts were sent to space for the assembly of this very space station. They successfully carried out their work here continuously for 21 days, and during this time, they stayed in space for a longer period than any astronaut or crew had ever done before. During this period, they conducted many experiments and studies in space during spacewalks and became victims of a major accident during their mission. Which is called decompression in the language of spaceflight. In fact, when these 3 cosmonauts undocked from the space station for re-entry to Earth, the cabin vent valve remained open. As a result, all the pressure from the service module started leaking into space, creating a severe pressure difference inside the service module. Because of this, they died such a painful death. In this accident, Commander Georgy Dobrovolsky, flight engineer Vladislav Volkov, and research engineer Viktor Patsayev lost their lives. Later, during the investigation, it was found that the valve was a defective piece which claimed the lives of all 3 scientists. What global safety measures can prevent these dangers? After this incident, there have been 2 major space disasters, including the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger disaster and the 2003 Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. However, both of these accidents happened either just after launch or after the mission was completed during re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. They had nothing to do with mid-space death. Okay, now let's move on to telling you about the real mission. All 3 cosmonauts died after being exposed to the harsh and brutal environment of space, but even then, they were still miles away from complete exposure inside a cabin. On the other hand, if such a scenario is limited to just a few seconds, it would be very different. According to a study, a naked human body can survive in the outer space environment for a maximum of 15 seconds. During this time, the subjected body undergoes many brutal changes and many people can faint. Outer space is almost a 100% vacuum. That's why there's no point in trying to breathe or hold your breath here. The very next second after exposure, you'll feel a sharp pain in your lungs, and at the same time, there will be rapid movement in your veins and arteries. And this movement will soon turn into exposure for your body. By now, your brain would be dead, but there would still be a little bit of life left in your body. However, your body's tissues will keep tearing continuously and your bones will move farther apart than before. And overall, after about 15 seconds, you will freeze solid in the icy temperatures of space. After this, your body will keep moving in the same direction and speed at which it was last separated. However, this journey won't last very long either. Because if you are in low Earth orbit, soon due to orbital decay, you will re-enter Earth's atmosphere, where this journey through the atmosphere can be much longer than you might think. However, every passing second of this unknown journey will make you feel the fear of death and introduce you to the torments of this merciless space. And then, even after your death, your corpse will be tossed around as if there is still some hope left. Actually, in such a situation, the luckiest thing for an astronaut would be to reach the space station for help. In fact, to do this, his spacesuit will have a dedicated radiocom set which can transmit his voice to the ground team sitting on Earth, or he can contact the space station present in orbit above. But there is a problem here, and that is that the astronaut is in space, not on Earth. Currently, there is no technology that can bring a lost astronaut back to the space station. Therefore, National Aeronautics and Space Administration makes sure that everything is absolutely perfect before sending any astronaut on a spacewalk. He's secured with a high-pressure steel tether, which always keeps the astronaut connected and also prevents him from drifting into outer space. Even if for a moment we assume that this special kind of rope gets detached in outer space, then there is one option. He always has this with him, which we know as extravehicular activity or extravehicular activity. Actually, this is a jetpack system. With the propulsion motors attached to it, anyone can give a push. Let me tell you, these two cylinders hanging on the astronaut's back carry oxygen gas, which helps the astronaut breathe throughout the spacewalk. One oxygen tank can pump oxygen into outer space for up to 16 hours under normal conditions. Also, to cancel out the extreme temperatures of space, the fabric of the spacesuit has fluid tubes in which chilled water flows all the time, which always keeps the astronaut safe. But when all of this shuts down after a few hours, that's when the real trouble for the astronaut will begin. From suffocating to death due to lack of oxygen to decompression as soon as the batteries discharge, it will be something like what we imagined in the previous scenarios. These possibilities have introduced us to the brutal and terrifying face of space to a great extent. But at the same time, it's equally true that to take knowledge to new heights, you have to take risks and overcome fear to achieve victory. Why did National Aeronautics and Space Administration send a monkey into space? It was January 31, 1961, a small monkey in the cold winds of Florida. Maybe he was scared, maybe a little curious, or maybe he was feeling something that can't be described in human language. That chimpanzee's name was Ham, and in the next few minutes, with a loud blast, the Mercury Redstone rocket soared towards space and disappeared from everyone's sight. But inside that rocket, he was sitting alone, surrounded by walls of machines, and outside was the terrifying silence of infinite space. As soon as he went far from Earth into space, his small cry echoed in the silence of space. Maybe no one heard it, but it left behind a question. Why did National Aeronautics and Space Administration send this innocent animal into that unknown world of space? This isn't some emotional movie story, it's a blend of scientific discovery and the emotions of a small creature. Today, we'll look for answers to many questions about that mission. We will find out what scientific purposes were behind sending Ham into space and how that journey touched his life. This is a story that will surprise you, move you, and make you think, so get ready for this thrilling journey. In the 1960s, the world was divided into two parts. On one side was America, and on the other side was the Soviet Union. There was a war going on between the two, not fought with guns, but with rockets. This was a battle to show the world which country was the most powerful in the world, and in the midst of this, in 1957, the Soviet Union took the lead by launching a satellite named Sputnik. This was an embarrassing moment for America and National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which had just been established in 1958. The pressure on National Aeronautics and Space Administration kept increasing to keep America ahead in this space race. People were expecting something big from National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The Soviet Union had only sent a satellite into space, so National Aeronautics and Space Administration had to do something even bigger. What could be bigger than sending humans into space? But sending humans into space was not that easy. The scientists faced a mountain of questions. How does the human body function in the microgravity of space? What effect will radiation have on astronauts? Is it even possible to breathe in space? To find answers to these questions, it was first decided to send animals into space. However, this idea was not new. The Soviet Union had already sent dogs into space, with Laika being the most famous, who was sent into space in 1957 on the Sputnik 2 mission, but unfortunately, she never returned. America had also sent fruit flies and mice, but that wasn't enough. National Aeronautics and Space Administration needed something more, an animal that was very close to humans, that could think like them and perform small tasks in space. Chimpanzees were perfect for this job. Their brains, their actions, and 98% of their DNA matched with humans. DNA made them special, and that's why Ham was chosen for this mission. The end of this mission wasn't that painful, but it raised many questions about whether these missions were just cruel experiments. This was the sacrifice of animals for the progress of our science for selfish humans. Ham's life. Ham was born in 1957. In Cameroon's dense African forests, he was just an ordinary chimpanzee child, playing around, sleeping in his mother's lap, and swinging on the branches of trees. His world was filled with the sounds of the jungle, the chirping of birds, the rustling of the wind, and the soft calls of his troop. But these happy days did not last long. One morning, an attack by hunters changed his life forever. His mother was shot and Ham was captured. At just 3 years old, he became an orphan. He was locked in a small cage and then shipped to America by boat. His new life began at the Rare Bird Farm in Miami, where he was alone, without family, and without the freedom of the jungle. In 1969, he was sent to Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. At that time, his name was just number 65. A code that didn't make him more than just an animal, but later he was given the name Ham in honor of the Holloman Aerospace Medical Center. His once innocent eyes, which saw jungle greenery, were now surrounded by machines and scientists in white coats. Before sending Ham to space, his rigorous training began. National Aeronautics and Space Administration needed to know if he could work in the challenging conditions of space, and for this, he was strapped to a special seat. Then, he was taught how to pull levers. Every time he pulled the correct lever, he would get a banana pellet, but if he made a mistake, he would get a mild electric shock. This training wasn't easy for him. He was a wild animal used to freedom, but now he longed for that freedom. He had to sit in a small space for hours every day with barely any room to move, and he was also being given electric shocks. He probably couldn't understand what was happening to him, but maybe he accepted this as a part of life. And then his trainers noticed that there was definitely something special about him. He learned faster than the other chimpanzees, his intelligence and curiosity set him apart, but this training also took away his innocence. Many times he would scream, shake his cage as if he was asking for his old life back. But eventually, he accepted this phase of his life. Now he was completely ready. Not just for an experiment, but for such a dangerous journey that would open the doors of space for humans in the future. The historic day of Haim's space journey finally arrived on January 31, 1961. In the morning, Haim was strapped into his special seat. His small body was covered in a spacesuit, and there was a strange expression in his eyes. As soon as the Mercury Redstone 2 rocket took off, his body was pressed down by the heavy G-force. The rocket stayed in space for 6 minutes. During this time, Haim pulled his levers just as he was taught in training. The scientists monitored his heart rate, breathing, and brain activity. In the beginning, everything was fine. He was alive and working according to the plan. But something went wrong in this mission. The rocket's oxygen system failed, and while returning to Earth, the space capsule landed about 200 kilometers away from its designated spot in the Atlantic Ocean. Ham's life was in danger. When the rescue team opened the capsule, he was wet from the water and scared, but the good thing was that he was alive. He had completed that dangerous journey in space. His success gave National Aeronautics and Space Administration the confidence that humans could also go into space. And indeed, just 3 months later, Alan Shepard became the first American astronaut to go into space. What did we learn? Our journey was not just a stunt. There were many deep scientific purposes behind it. At that time, the effect of microgravity on the human body was nothing less than a mystery. Data from our mission showed that even without gravity, the heart and brain can function. His heart rate went up to about 150 beats per minute, but it remained stable. There were no changes happening in space that would cause any harm to life or property while staying in a safe spacecraft. The effect of radiation was also minimal, Sathi. He proved by pulling the levers that intelligence and motor skills work in space. This information was essential for the Mercury program. Because of Ham, scientists became convinced and gained confidence that humans can not only survive in space, but also work there. Ham's short journey even paved the way for the Apollo mission and the landing on the moon. But what did this scientific victory mean for Ham? Ham was brought back from space. But his life was never the same again, even though he was now a hero. His pictures were printed in newspapers, but this fame was meaningless to him. He was first kept at the North Carolina Zoo. Then, in 1980, he was sent to the National Zoo in Washington District of Columbia there. He lived all alone. People came to see him without any forest, without his companions. But maybe he couldn't understand that. But there was also a sadness in his eyes. Maybe he wanted his lost freedom back, or maybe the memory of his mother was making him sad. Finally, he died in 1983. He was only 26 years old. He was buried in Arlington National Cemetery, but only a small stone has been placed on his grave. Was he really a hero, or a victim who was used by people for their own dreams? What happened after Haim? After Haim, National Aeronautics and Space Administration sent more chimpanzees into space like Enos, who went into orbit in 1961 on Mercury Atlas V. But as technology improved, the need for animals decreased. Today, robots and simulations have taken their place in space missions. Still, Ham's story is very special. He took risks that humans couldn't take. It's because of him that today we've been able to reach space. Ham's story took a different turn, but his legacy is still the knowledge we gained from Ham's data. It was a victory for our science and our good fortune that Ham returned safely. But this mission completely changed his life. He was never able to live on his own terms again. The International Space Station is the largest laboratory ever in space, weighing about 4,500 tons, and one day it will fall back to Earth. There are many flaws in this international cooperation, which is causing confusion among the countries, and this could become the biggest threat to human civilization. So, how will this mega structure, the International Space Station, be brought back safely to Earth? For the past 25 years, it has been established in low Earth orbit by human civilization. The space station is where experiments are conducted for our benefit, where humans have continuously maintained their presence beyond Earth. And this space station brought together two countries with different ideologies, at least in space, and sent a message of unity. But now, the days of the International Space Station are numbered. In the coming months, National Aeronautics and Space Administration is going to review commercial proposals for vehicles that can decommission the space station in a controlled environment and bring it back to Earth. For this, National Aeronautics and Space Administration doesn't want to rely on the previously proposed plan, that is, multiple mission vehicles, because recently the relationship between America and Russia has deteriorated a lot, and National Aeronautics and Space Administration is ready to spend about $1 billion for this task. The end of the International Space Station is near, but this is going to be the biggest event in the history of human civilization. In the coming decade, the decommissioning of the space station will begin, and then it will set new parameters for aerospace, engineering, and international diplomacy. Although there are several countries from Canada, Japan, and Europe that support the International Space Station, the United States of America and Russia have played a crucial role in building the International Space Station. That's why these two countries dominate the space station. The first modules of the space station included one from the United States of America and one from Russia, which had reached orbit by 1998, and then the modules in November. In 2001, astronaut and two cosmonauts lived there for the first time. And since then, there has always been someone present on the International Space Station, but the International Space Station has worked far beyond its original planned duration. It was originally built to operate for only 15 years, but even today, in 2024, it is still operational. But as they say, nothing lasts forever, even if you don't like it. But the International Space Station will retire one day, and it will have to be brought down to Earth because keeping it in orbit forever is practically not possible. Now the pressure on National Aeronautics and Space Administration is increasing, that a clear strategy to bring down this giant machine should be presented to the world. Otherwise, it could become a danger for all of humanity. There's a saying that whatever goes up must come down. The same thing happens with the International Space Station. Earth's gravity constantly pulls it down toward itself. To keep it in orbit continuously, its trajectory is corrected with periodic boosts. That means, without periodic boosts, this spacecraft will lose speed, which will also decrease its altitude, and eventually it will start sinking rapidly into the deeper layers of Earth's atmosphere. As soon as it enters the atmosphere, due to friction, it will break into pieces and start burning. That doesn't happen. We've seen that it usually doesn't happen because the orbit maintaining boosters on the International Space Station are constantly at work. But now the problem is that Russia controls them, and whatever fuel and cargo they need to operate is supplied by Russia. Theoretically, it's also not possible to lift this giant beast out of low Earth orbit and completely out of Earth's atmosphere, because lifting such a heavy structure would be extremely expensive. Besides this, if the station is just abandoned in a graveyard orbit, that would be the most dangerous thing, because its parts are more than 2 decades old and they can't be prevented from disintegrating. A space station left in a graveyard orbit will become a threat to our satellites and our space trips. You wouldn't want to just leave it in any orbit. It's better if you look at it like a museum piece. But to do that, the space station would have to be brought down to Earth without breaking it or burning it up. But that's not possible either. Because deconstructing the International Space Station is neither feasible nor possible. And the reason behind this is that when the space station was being built, it wasn't designed for disassembly, it was made as a permanent structure to orbit in space. And if we try to do that, the components that have been exposed to radiation for decades will create new dangers in space. That's why disassembling the International Space Station is also a big challenge. So these are the two ways the International Space Station could fall to Earth. Either we will deliberately bring it down through the atmosphere in a controlled manner, or it will deorbit uncontrollably and crash onto our Earth. One of these is a dangerous approach. The International Space Station is even bigger than a football field, and the path it orbits above the Earth covers areas where about 90% of the Earth's population lives. Although no humans have been harmed by a falling spacecraft so far, if a large structure like the International Space Station falls to Earth, it is definitely concerning. If it falls in a populated area, it will cause devastation. An uncontrolled re-entry is dangerous for people on Earth. Many lives could be lost, many could be injured, and there would also be property damage. But more than that, that day will remain a dark stain in the history of science. People will remember the last journey of ISS as a bad day. Now, since this will be a global event, the whole world will be watching ISS that day, but that day will definitely not be a good one. So what is the safest way to bring ISS down? National Aeronautics and Space Administration officials say that if ISS can somehow be directed to the remote South Pacific Ocean, away from populated areas, the risk of damage will be greatly reduced. This plan is very risky. Let me explain how the space station completes one orbit in about an hour and a half. This plan is very risky. Let me explain how. To avoid this, we have to bring the space station back to Earth as quickly as possible. But the problem is that the space station can't be brought back quickly. If we do that, it will hit the atmosphere with great force. This will increase air resistance and the entire station will break up into large pieces. For example, its solar arrays and modules will go out of control and follow an unpredictable path, which will almost certainly cause loss of life and property. Besides this, the irregular geometry of the space station increases this risk even more. That's why it's important that when the International Space Station enters our Earth's atmosphere, a terrible accident could happen. Even after this, our troubles won't be over. At that time, Earth's atmosphere will be nothing less than a villain for us, our planet's own atmosphere. During the Sun's 11-year activity cycle, it keeps getting thicker and thinner. Apart from this, our atmosphere keeps changing continuously due to the passing of day and night as well. If you are deorbiting a large and heavy structure like the International Space Station, it depends a lot on what changes are happening in the densities inside the Earth here. A slight, unpredictable change can bring the entire mission to a dead end. But there's one more thing. Predicting the density of the atmosphere in real time is nearly impossible. If all these facts are combined, then this process will work something like this. The International Space Station will be left to natural orbital decay for several weeks or months. It will gradually lose altitude, and about halfway, at around 250 miles above the Earth, custom-built vehicles will be attached to the International Space Station. They will perform a deorbit burn to slowly bring it down. After covering about half the remaining distance, a destabilization effect will be seen on the International Space Station. It will start to wobble slightly. When this happens at an altitude of 125 miles, mission controllers will adjust its trajectory. By making a slight adjustment, its circular orbit will be changed to an elliptical orbit through a rocket burn. Its minimum distance from Earth will be kept at 90 miles. That means it will still be kept outside Earth's atmosphere. After this, its path will be set in such a way that it comes straight down from the sky. Its linear displacement will be reduced from the elliptical orbit, and finally, it will be made to fall into the South Pacific Ocean. The whole world will witness this amazing scene. How will this unbelievable mission be accomplished? So far, National Aeronautics and Space Administration officials have said that 3 Russian Progress vehicles will work together to deorbit the International Space Station, but this plan has not been finalized because if we use more than one multiple deorbiters, there could be problems with coordination. Even if everything goes right, there are several challenges in this, such as designing and manufacturing different multiple Progress vehicles, keeping their launch pads ready. Besides this, connecting them, maintaining those connections, and doing all this quickly is a real challenge. And when it comes to the United States-Russia partnership on the International Space Station, things are not right here. Ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, the relationship between these two countries has reached its lowest point since the Cold War. Ideologically and politically, both these countries are opposite to each other, which makes the chances of improvement in their relationship quite low. This has also created a lot of tension regarding the International Space Station collaboration. Russia has also decided to leave the International Space Station. It is believed that by 2028, Russia will withdraw its support and everything from the space station. But National Aeronautics and Space Administration is not ready for this yet. Russia is highly skilled in aerospace technology, and replacing its technology from the space station so quickly will not be easy. And it's also not certain whether, in such a situation, Russia will provide its Progress vehicles to control the deorbiting of the International Space Station or not. Anyway, some recent events have shown that the world's trust in Russian-built hardware is starting to decline. In 2018, the Russian Soyuz spacecraft docked with the space station, and later it was discovered that air was leaking from a small hole in it. The news spread that the Russians had deliberately drilled such a hole. That same year, a Russian flight carrying 2 cosmonauts, the mission had to be aborted due to the launch failure. In 2021, a science module was ready, although it was originally supposed to be launched in 2007. Even after many delays, this module still had many issues. Due to the misfiring of the thrusters, the station went in the wrong direction, but the problem was quickly detected and everything was fixed. Leaks have occurred in 3 Russian cooling systems on the International Space Station in recent years, releasing toxic ammonia gas into space. Last year in August, Russia's first lunar mission, which was sent after almost 5 decades, also crashed on the moon. This makes an American deorbit vehicle essential for National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Because Russia can't be relied upon in any way, National Aeronautics and Space Administration has made contracts with SPACEX and Boeing. Another reason behind this is that if National Aeronautics and Space Administration has its own transportation vehicles, Russia's power will be significantly reduced. If National Aeronautics and Space Administration wants to make a single deorbit vehicle, it doesn't have many options. Our existing technology is not sufficient for such deorbit vehicles, but National Aeronautics and Space Administration does have the closest existing technology, and that is the European Service Module from the Artemis program, which took National Aeronautics and Space Administration's uncrewed Orion capsule into orbit around the moon. And in the future, this will also take humans to the moon. Apart from this, whatever else exists is either too weak or way too powerful, or they just can't carry enough fuel to complete this task. That's why National Aeronautics and Space Administration has put forward a commercial proposal to build custom-built deorbit vehicles. Whether National Aeronautics and Space Administration tries a new vehicle or puts existing vehicles to work, even this one decision can create ripples in United States-Russia relations and other international relations. Because the fate of the space station will be decided by everyone's agreement. But here, National Aeronautics and Space Administration's public documents do not make it clear whether the United States has taken consent from the Canadian, Japanese, European, and Russian space agencies to commercially execute this plan or not. The end of this mega project in such a way is becoming a hot topic of discussion around the world. Most of the discussion is about future partnerships in space. National Aeronautics and Space Administration is partnering with other countries through the Artemis Accord, which includes India, but Russia is not a part of it. This shows that the closeness between these two countries, which the International Space Station helped to build, might not be achieved by any other effort. Now everyone is clear that Russia wants to leave the International Space Station, and the other countries will have to take charge of it. The final journey of the International Space Station will mark the beginning of a new era on Earth. But no matter what happens, that day will be very precious. Everyone will want to witness that moment, and in this way, the International Space Station will bid us farewell. What is your opinion on this? Do let us know in the comment section. Also, friends, we have talked about the history of the International Space Station in this video, so do check it out as well. Friends, how did you like this video? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed it, please like and share with your friends. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more videos like this. We'll see you soon with another informative video. Stay curious, be happy, and goodbye.